the scene, in a sense, already encompasses the whole story, beginning, middle, and end, past, present, and to come.
You mean the Annunciation scene?
The Annunciation, in announcing the beginning of modernity, announces everything that matters.
Including the Trinity, yes.
There isn't going to be a post-modernity in the thought world of that artwork. But there, again and again, there's a kind of repetition of that scene of the Annunciation in late medieval and Renaissance art, rather like the repetition of the originary scene that is a feature of the rhetoric of gatherings like this. And that's, I think, important. And it seems to me to have, I mean, there's a line, I forget who speaks it originally, that says that a person who is engaged in the act of reading, at least in the act of reading as figured from the scene in the Confessions where Ambrose is reading silently, onwards, the person caught in the act of reading is at that moment dead to the world. The person contemplating a work of visual art, at least standing in a gallery by him or herself, wrapped in that moment, is in effect dead. This moment of heightened life, supreme freedom and choice, if you like, is also curiously monumental in its way. Proto-eschatological. It takes us back to Eric's suggestion yesterday. We needed, in thinking again about the inscription, to think about the relation between seme and soma, between the sign and the tomb. And it's no coincidence that we tend to look at art in buildings that are like mausolea, entombed already.
In fact, just one coda to that. One of the reasons I took this project on is I remember that there's a remark of René Girard's at the end of his Dostoevsky book, which I quote in a longer paper, that all Western art is incarnational. And I reread it carefully. What does he mean? And he means death and resurrection. And in fact, even the incarnation and the nativity, that is read back from the resurrection, And so that's the problem. We have linear time, past, present, future. But there is this, what you're mentioning, even the incarnation is read backwards.
Well,
I'm connecting your idea of art and death and sacrifice, because to say art is incarnational for René Girard, he actually means fall and redemption. He means crucifixion, resurrection. He doesn't mean the baby, little baby manger and that kind of stuff. He doesn't mean Christmas, he means Easter.
Andrew Bartlett has a question, right? I guess that's why you got up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Is this on? Yeah.
Yes.
One of the words that kept cropping up at the conference, I think Raphael Fauché, who's not here with us right now, mentioned it, was the ethical. You might be able to blame it mostly on Sandy, reminding us of Levinas. And this ties in a bit with what Mark just said about, maybe pausing to focus on the abortiveness of the abortive gesture of appropriation. To what extent is the answer to the question of ethical in GA, or in originary thinking, an emphasis on the faith in representation itself as an ethical act? In other words, the temporality of the sign. Sorry. The temporality of the sign itself being the abortive gesture of appropriation, being the thing we become conscious of as we become human. But the ethical problem being that, or maybe the moral problem being that, the word is never the thing. And you're not satisfied with the word. And so, the word is never enough for the hungry person, or the starving, or the person at the bottom of the global hierarchy, if you like, or any social hierarchy. So another way of saying it is that the temporality of the sign is not the temporality of the human. It's not the temporality of the whole scene, or at least not of the whole event. But as a system of thinking, GA comes back again and again and again in some weird way to the goodness of the sign. I don't know, I'll just stop there and maybe let Eric run with it, and maybe Andrew and Mark would want to jump in. Because I think this was a question that was big in, not just in Sandy's mind, but in the mind of many participants, and it's directly related to the transcendent, obviously.
Well, from what I understand, there was a gentleman in the session that I didn't attend that was basically accusing GA of not having a theory of morality or something like that. But in any case, well, you know, I think all human interrelations are ethical by definition. You're always dealing with ethics. Ethics is the sort of science of how we get along, or let's not say the science, but methods for human harmony, relative, of course, but, you know, why we aren't always killing each other, in other words. I think if Girard made one major point that took him beyond Durkheim, it was this realization that instead of just talking about reinforcing solidarity, as Durkheim does, society has to do more than just reinforce pre-existing solidarity. It has to prevent violence from destroying the whole society. And certainly we see enough of that in these literary sources. But no, I don't think GA ever is about the goodness of the sign. GA provides a model for how the sign mediates between humanity and its physical needs and the kind of mimetic problems that are raised by these needs. And I think I did say a few things the other day that, you know, we are material beings, we have material needs, and, you know, if anything, I don't want to, you know, keep talking about my differences from Rene, but I mean, one thing that you might find objectionable in the scapegoat mechanism is that it sort of forgets about our material needs. It's about killing some guy. But, you know, when do we eat? You know what I mean? The sacrificial feast is about eating. It's not just about killing something. So it's much more natural, and it keeps us closer to our animal reality to talk about how do we share the food so we don't kill each other. And the fact is today we don't engage in human sacrifice very much, at least not in a normal course of events, but we engage in lots of feasting, and you can call them sacrificial if you want, but here again, just as Mauss's system applies to our daily lives, because that's how we live our that's how we live our sociality, by exchanging dinners and little favors and so on. The same is true for things like Thanksgiving feasts or seders in the Jewish tradition or Easter dinners and so on, that, you know, we have these periodic feasts, and in other words, when you get together, you eat. It's so natural that you don't even talk about it, right? When you say, let's get together, you don't mean we're all going to sit around the living room and, you know, play cards. You mean you can do that afterward. So ethics is about getting along. What I call the moral model, however, is the transcendent version of ethics, where you always go back to this notion of reciprocity. I mean, why are we so resentful? Because we resent every moment that does not embody this reciprocity, so that anybody who goes first arouses our resentment. Even in a gathering like this, you know, when one person is talking, the other people saying, why is he talking? I mean, it's, you know, it's a fact of life. You can, of course, become the great guru and everybody worships you, but worship is a very resentful activity too. You know, there's always this sort of va-et-vient. You can't, any inequality is immediately sensed. If we have, you know, if you want to talk about evolutionary psychology in our little modules, if we have one module that everybody, you know, everyone has, it's the resentment module. Everyone knows how to feel resentment. And the great, you know, both great and horrible achievement of the victimary era, if you like, of postmodernity, is that we've learned to listen to resentment. We've said, look, you know, in the past we just let our inferiors, you know, be inferior. Now we listen to them because we realize, not only because we realize that people aren't really inferior, they're just in inferior circumstances, but also because it's our only check against the kind of horrors that went on in the Nazi era. It's, you know, when you just let resentment lead to all the violence against a particular group. Well, if you listen to everyone's resentment,